everyone for being here. We really appreciate your time. This is an important discussion that we're going to have today on transportation, so your attendance here is very appreciated. My name is Scott Cook. I'm the CEO of the Longmont Area Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today. I'm going to go through a few notes on the agenda so you know what to expect this morning, and then also one announcement. In the original event format, we've had Shane Madsen from Independence Institute coming to speak today. Due to a scheduling conflict, she is not able to join us. We are working with the Independence Institute to have them come back, hopefully sometime in September. So we will let you know when we're able to have them come speak as well. So back to the agenda, we are going to start with Phil Greenwald. He is our City Transportation Planner, and he is no stranger to our Chamber's Public Policy Committee, but he will give a perspective from the local level here on our transportation needs and our regional needs in the area. When we were putting this event together, it was very important that we let you hear, again, from the local level. Longmont has some unique concerns when it comes to transportation, and so we were really wanted to have Phil come and start our meeting off. After Phil speaks, we'll have just a couple minutes of Q&A, so save your questions for him. And then we will have Kelly Bruff. She is the President and CEO of the Denver Chamber of Commerce and the leading organization with Let's Go Colorado. She will speak, and she's been working for quite a while on transportation issues. She will have a presentation, and then we will also do Q&A after that. One note on Q&A, we really want to get all your questions answered. Please speak up and ask your questions. I would just ask that you not monopolize the Q&A time. Let everybody in the audience have a chance to ask questions as well. Once Kelly is done, we will hear from Mayor Bagley. Brian will come and speak to the position of City Council and his thoughts on our presentation this morning. So with that, I will turn it over to Phil, and we will get started. Thank you.
I'm going to use the mic because nobody can ever hear me, so unlike the mayor, so. Sorry. Yeah, also Scott knows that mornings aren't really my forte, so I'll try my best to be bright and cheery this morning and try to answer your questions if you have any. My name is Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planner with the City of Longmont. We've got a few slides. We're just going to go over some of the issues that Longmont's facing and the region. So I just wanted to kind of go over some of the things that we're talking about, set up the different ballot initiatives, and let Kelly come up and talk a little bit about those as well. So especially the one she's here for. Just to start off, we are looking at some regional transportation needs for the whole area, the Northwest area. We put together a couple of years ago, as 2014, the Northwest Area Mobility Study, the NAM study. For Longmont, that meant looking at the State Highway 119 corridor. Really looking, what came out of this NAM study was the idea that there would be managed lanes, bus rapid transit, bikeway, and intersection improvements along that corridor for Longmont residents and folks nearby. Also, we were looking at the 287 corridor, the Main Street or Highway 287 corridor. And that again included some intersection improvements and some safety improvements along that corridor, and really looking at what the next steps are about moving transportation through that area down south and even further north for some of our transportation travel needs. And the Northwest Rail has always been something that we're always talking about since 2004. So we're continuing to put that on our list as far as something that's needed in this area, the rail connection from Longmont through Boulder to Denver. So using the BNSF rail line that's out there. Obviously, there's a lot of issues with that now. That could be a whole topic unto itself. And if we want to ask more questions, feel free to ask later. But right now, what we're looking for is basically peak hour. So we're talking about 3 trains in the morning, 3 trains in the evening. We're really trying to pare this down to be something that's something palatable, something we can actually bite off and chew. Instead of talking about a $1.4 billion project, we're talking about maybe a $300 million project, somewhere in that range. So those are the things we're looking at with Northwest Rail. Obviously, there's no fast tracks money in that until about 2042 or after. So that's the disappointment there. We want to move it up. The other pieces that really are part of the NAMs are the State Highway 7 corridor, or Arapahoe Road, or Arapahoe Avenue in Boulder. So think about that going all the way out to Brighton, from Boulder to Brighton. So that's a pretty long corridor. It affects a number of municipalities as well as some counties. The State Highway 42, 95th, that's really more of a Louisville issue, but it does affect the region as far as moving people. There's some safety issues there and some transit improvements that can happen as well. South Boulder Road is another one, and then completion of the US 36 BRT managed lanes. I won't get too much into those because I want to kind of be quick here and get to California. Longmont Transportation Funding, our street fund last year had $20.3 million budgeted for streets. Of that, our sales and use tax, or our sales and use tax, that's a 3/4% sales tax on all goods in Longmont, accounted for, you can see about 3/4 of that. The State Highway Users Fund, or the HUTF Highway Users Tax Fund, accounted for about $2.8 million of that. And then the rest came from automobile tax and miscellaneous. The Highway Users Tax Fund is really the gas tax. So if you think about that, we get about a small portion, probably about maybe a fifth of that from that gas tax. So we have a lot of projects that we need to get built in Longmont. And the only one we have really funded right now in the current, what we call Capital Improvement Program, CIP, 5-year CIP, is the Boston Avenue Bridge over the St. Frank Creek. And again, these are capital projects. We have a lot of different funds that go into operating our transportation system, but this is one of building actual projects on the ground. And so we have the Boston Avenue Bridge over the St. Frank Creek. That's a $4.2 million project. You'll look here, we have quiet zones, State Highway 119 improvements at South Pratt to Nelson, so a stretch of Kent Pratt Boulevard as it kind of straightens out from the diagonal and goes from Nelson east. That's a piece only partially funded. The State Highway 119 Hover Street intersection, we've been talking a lot about that lately with our Southwest Operations study, so that's another piece, again, only partially funded. So this gives you an idea of some of the projects that we have, and then we move in from the partially funded to our unfunded category, so we have a lot of projects in that as well. So this is what's being presented to council as far as our capital improvement program for next year, for 2019. And so you can kind of get a very good idea that we have shortfalls in the city, and we are always looking for funding wherever we can get it. We typically go for grant funding, and that's the best way for us to kind of go after those larger funds that we need. Those are typically funded at, we provide 20% of the match. The federal grant can provide up to 80% of that. So that's how we typically do that. And that comes around every 4 years or so. So depending on Dr. Cog, they've been doing it. They were in a 2-year cycle, and now they're in more of a 4-year cycle for those funds. So you can see that we're all kind of stretching it thin here. So I just want to set up the 2 statewide ballot initiatives to kind of help us address some of these transportation issues. One is the Fix Our Damn Roads Now, and then the Let's Go Colorado. So those are the titles of those. You'll see those on your ballot this November. So Fix Our Damn Roads Now, I'm just going to kind of explain what we know about it so far. It's basically issuing bonds, so $3.5 million in bonds, or $3.5 billion in bonds. The state is currently saying we have about a $9 billion shortfall in a statewide project. So $3.5 billion gets us along that, what gets us going along that road, so to speak, of fixing those. So there's no tax increase with this, as I understand it. And bonds will be repaid by reallocation of existing revenues. You can kind of see up here, they must be used exclusively for road and bridge expansion, construction, maintenance, and repair for specific statewide projects. So none of this would necessarily come from locals, but you did see some state highway projects on our list, State Highway 119 and 287. So those were on our list as far as things that we feel are important and that we passed on to, that would be part of the statewide system. None of these funds can be used for transit or administration or indirect costs and expenses. So it really is a pared down bill, really looking at fixing the highway infrastructure. And so a couple of projects that they show, and this has just been what we can get so far from the folks putting this together. Is State Highway 66 would see corridor improvements, basically west of I-25, some widening, safety, and intersection improvements. Those are absolutely needed. So we're working on some studies right now that are looking at that section of roadway. So this came directly out of that study. State Highway 119 expanding capacity. So that really talks about that section from Boulder all the way really to I-25, expanding the capacity and making sure people can get through there. Again, this only refers back to highway improvements, not so much the transit, but not to say that managed lanes could be part of that solution. So the things that you see on US 36, the things that you're seeing on I-25 being built right now that cause a little bit of congestion and issues there. But as soon as those are built out, the managed lanes can be part of that. And then State Highway North, I-25 North, State Highway 7 to State Highway 14 up in Fort Collins area. So there's been a long push, and it's been going on for a number of years to get that section improved. And I think we're finally seeing that there's some momentum behind that, so that roadway is moving forward. Whether this passes or not, I think there's a big push to get lots of grant funding funneled to this area. So Let's Go Colorado is a little different, and Kelly will talk a lot more about this, but we're really talking about sales tax increase of 0.62% for 20 years. 45% of that funding would go to CDOT projects. 15% would be held for multimodal options, so we would all compete, the statewide would compete for those 15%, but we'd probably do it within our sub-regions. 20% goes to cities, 20% to counties, allocated for that gas tax that we talked about earlier. So it'd be allocated in that same way. And that's forecasted to increase revenue to Boulder County communities by about $250 million total for the 20-year life of that fund. And Boulder County, Northwest Metro, CDOT project funding list would be about $705 million. And I'll go into that a little bit here. What's on the list for CDOT are the projects you see up here. I'll see if I have I want to push the wrong button here. But we have the 119 Managed Lanes project that is on that list. So what we talked about before between Boulder and Longmont, that section of State Highway 119. State Highway 7, the Arapahoe Road project that we talked about. US 287, looking into the possibility and where we would put managed lanes and intersection and certain safety improvements for transit there as well, or for all modes, but transit would be included in that. The 42 95th section that we talked about, the 20th Street Broadway connections for some transit operational improvements. These are all on state highways, believe it or not. But State Highway 95 and State Highway 95 and Sheridan, talking about some increases there, and then State Highway 7 and I-25 interchange as well. So those are all projects in the Northwest region that made it onto the CDOT list. So you'll see the total of $705 million worth of projects there. For Longmont, this would mean in the first year, so currently we get 2.9 million is kind of projected as well. The $2.9 million for funding. In the first year, we get an additional $3.1 million. So 108% increase of what we're currently getting would be put on top of in the current Longmont budget. So you'd see that 2.8, 2.9 from before grow to more like 6 million in the future charts that we would show. Over 20 years, that would be about $89 million for the city of Longmont. And those come directly to us, issued by the state through the same funding and mechanism as the gas tax. So that's it for this portion of the presentation. If you have any questions, I'm glad to take them. Ms. Finn.
Do you have the breakdown of what the North I-25 amount would be for the Let's Go Colorado tax?
I don't have it. But
I think I have it there. Okay.
Kelly's going to be ready. Any other questions for me?
Can you go back to the last slide?
Sure.
So, will the current HUD funding still come in?
Correct. Yes, we'll still get the gas taxes, will still come in. This is not a gas tax, but this is on top. This is the sales tax, it would be on top of that gas
So
tax.
it's 2.9 plus the 3.1?
Correct.
And I apologize if you covered this, but when you were talking about the street tax being the majority of where we get the money from, what is the street tax? What is it coming from?
I'm sorry, yeah, I should explain that more. The street tax, the question is about where's the street tax come from and what is that about? So the city in 1986, correct, passed the first of many 3/4 cent sales taxes. And those were 5-year increments, so they'd sunset after 5 years. So it was really hard to do some planning for folks who, like me, we do plan for transportation, but we had 5-year increments of the sales tax. And so it was a 3/4 cent sales tax that's added to every purchase. And we've, the voters have approved that and kept it going. And the last one we approved in 2014, I believe, for 10-year, and it starts in 2016, so it'll go until 2026. Yes, sir.
Do the numbers here reflect the SCOTUS decision to allow states to enforce taxation of online sales?
These do not. Not yet. Yes.
This may not be all that important, but the numbers just don't add up for me. $6 million over 20 years should be 120 million. And I'm looking at 89 or 90 million. Where does the other 30 million go?
Well, what you see here is the $3.1 million is the added. So the 2.9 is is what we have. So if you look at the added, over 20 years it'll grow. So I did the same thing. I had to kind of multiply this out times 20. It doesn't add up.
So to
but
the
as
89 million, we would add 20 times the 3 million. Get to a total.
approximately, but it would grow every year, right? Sales taxes would
Not
grow.
3 million a year, it's 3 million a year increases or changes.
Yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you. We'll get started with the next piece of our meeting here. Kelly Bruff is the CEO and president of the Denver Chamber of Commerce. I believe this is the first time she's been here to speak to a Longmont Chamber, so at least it's been a while.
Yeah.
So, we're very glad to have her here this morning. She has been focusing for a number of years on putting Coloradans back to work, and not just back to work, but in actually really good jobs. It's a clear action that's driven the CEO from higher education to City Hall and now to the Chamber. Kelly has worked to advance our state, and find opportunities of improvement, whether it's been advocating for P20 education reform, implementing groundbreaking programs like 311 and Pay for Performance at the City of Denver, and consulting dispute resolutions for local governments. She's directed an internationally recognized leadership program and has been the chief of staff for the then Mayor John Hickenlooper, and was the first female director of the Human Resources Department at the City of Denver. And she is no stranger to transportation. I like this fact, I think, the most. She was the first female snowplow driver at Stapleton International Airport. She now serves as the first female president and CEO of the Denver Chamber. Though born and raised in a small town in Montana, she is Colorado to the core, and you're just as likely to see her testifying at the state capitol as you are to see her on her mountain bike in the mountains. So please help me welcome Kelly Bruff.
Thank you so much. What the bio tells you is I can't hold a job, and I keep switching. I really appreciate you taking the time and allowing us to talk with you today about this proposal. What really struck me is when I see our local community needs, what is the same we see in Longmont, we see in every city and county throughout the state, and it's a long list of priority projects that we have no strategy to address. And so it was just that caused us about 4 years ago to start working throughout the state with partners to ask the question, what do we do about that? I'll try to share that with you. I really do want to make this where you can ask me whatever questions you want. You can stop, shout names at me, whatever you want to do. Let's make this most meaningful to you. So if you have a question, please do interrupt me and let's get to it. So we do have a problem. Just driving up here today, I was feeling bad for everybody going southbound because while I was moving, they were not. And to some degree, what explains our challenge is just the in-migration we have had. And many of us think this in-migration has occurred in the last 10 years as we recovered from the recession. So what you see is this green line is actually highlights natural births and deaths. The good news is we're still all in that green line because we're here. But you can see that's pretty static, our growth for decades. Around 20,000 of us, more in growth every single year just because we live here and that's how our world has looked. What isn't so static is that gray line, and what you see is that's when we've had big years of people coming in and fewer leaving our state. The last 10 years, yes, we've had growth. We're projecting out on this line as well. But you can see the last 10 years have had growth. But if you look at the 90s, you really see that's where in-migration really occurred in Colorado. So how many of you moved to Colorado in the 90s? It's your fault that we face the problems we face today. It was a big, big in-migration, still the largest decade of growth in our state. So what has happened with regard to our transportation system with that growth? So our numbers at 2015 is the one I'll have you focus on, but you can see our population is significantly increased. We're approaching now doubling our state's population. Our vehicle miles traveled, about double as well. And yet we're funding at about 1/2 that system compared to what we were funding in 1991. So of course we're challenged to get people around and make our system work for us. As a matter of fact, the state of Utah spends about twice as much as we do per highway, which it means they're spending what we were spending in the 90s. They're spending today. And they're competing very effectively by doing it. So as Phil mentioned earlier, there's a $9 billion project list at CDOT. These are projects that have been identified by engineers as high priority, both because of capacity, but also because of safety issues, that they lack the maintenance to make those roads safe and work well for us. It's estimated CDOT alone has about a $1 billion annual shortfall, and that's when you add in their maintenance needs, because that $9 billion project list is just capital needs. We asked voters, you know, how important is transportation to you? We've been asking that. I think we've reviewed something like 9 polls from 4 different pollsters. We have more data on transportation than we probably want, but what it tells us is transportation ranks high. So do other issues, right? We have some challenges in Colorado. You're experiencing them with successes you've seen in Longmont, from housing to the cost of healthcare, but transportation ranks high. And when you look down that list, what you realize is there's other issues that make it even higher. Like when people talk about the challenges of growth, the number one reason people are concerned about growth is because their transportation experience has become so negative. You also see expanding public transit, buses, bike paths. So when you add those up, you realize transportation is ranking really high. That was, when we asked that question, we didn't lead them with any, here's a list, what one is high. We just said, tell us your biggest issue. This one, on the other hand, we said, here's a list of issues. Which one bugs you the most? And they said to us, transportation, once again, comes out on top. So then we wanted to get a sense of the intensity. And so this is in a sample just from 3 polls that we've done to say, okay, so it ranks high. How important is it to you? And what pollsters will tell you is when you get over 60% in very important or extremely important, it is really compelling. And you can see we're hitting really high numbers between 7 and 8, where people are saying this is a critical issue for them in a crisis. So that makes someone like me, who runs a chamber of commerce, ask the question, what do you do about that? It puts our very economy and our future at risk if we don't figure out how we address this issue. And there's a couple of reasons it puts us at risk, right? It's not just the bad experience that you have and that you're a little cranky, or your quality of life reduces. All of those things matter. But what it really puts at risk is we have one of the most educated workforces in the country. As a matter of fact, we have the 2nd most educated workforce in the country. We've attracted them here with a quality of life. Transportation system is part of that quality of life, and we put at risk our ability to retain that workforce and compete economically. So our chamber said this is a high priority for us. So we worked with a really broad statewide coalition, and over drinks I'd be happy to share with you how miserable it is to work with such a large statewide group, because it's hard, right? This is a group of people who do not see the world the same way, who have very different priorities in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, who their constituents are, and that's why it takes a long time when you put us all at a table to figure out how do we solve this in a way we could all support it. So we looked at every option, and the first option we looked at is, can you fund this out of the general fund? Can we solve our transportation needs using our general fund? We should maximize every dollar we can. And this last year, you probably were watching closely along with us as we were fighting for funding. We got some. But what we started to realize is if in a year like this, when we have increased dollars available in the budget, that's all we could get, we will never be able to solve our transportation needs. And it was one-time funding that we were successful at getting, not ongoing funding. And this is important because Phil raised it, right? 5 years of funding is nice, but it doesn't allow you to plan for 20-year kind of strategies or make the investments in really big projects. And so we started to focus on potential tax or revenue sources. And as a Chamber of Commerce, this doesn't get my members really excited. They're not like, if only you could find a tax to increase, Kelly, we would be thrilled, right? We tend to say last possible resort is a tax increase. We looked at a number of sources of income. I am happy to answer any questions about why we chose what we chose. As you know, we chose sales tax, and we chose it for a few reasons. One of the big reasons is about 59% of the sales tax is collected in the metro area, and only about 41% comes back. Now, why would a Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce be like, that's brilliant? The reason we think that's brilliant is because the reality is the rest of the state hasn't experienced the same kind of economic success we've had in the metro area, and we should be making sure that we are sharing and improving our system statewide. That workforce, they want to get around our state. We have to be able to move them, and the only way rural Colorado is going to be able to make the investments in their roads is if we find a way to help. And so we actually liked this tax structure for that reason. Another really good reason is lots of those taxes only tax residents. I want you to think property tax, income tax, vehicle registration, 100% on just us who live here. We wanted a tax structure that put it on tourists. And you'll be, I think, happy to know 55 million out-of-state people come to our state every year, and we think they should help pay for our roads. And this is a tax model that actually ensures they help us pay for it, taking some of the burden off of all of us. A small increase in sales tax is meaningful. This is a 0.62% increase on a current 2.9 state sales tax. We'll raise $797 million in the first year with that tax increase. We know that we need significant revenue if we're going to solve this. And I will tell you why that became so important to us is because 88% of our roads are managed by cities and counties. This is what Phil's doing for you every day. And the reality, what we realized, most proposals were only addressing state needs that were coming before you. And if we didn't do something to help local, our lives weren't going to improve. I might get faster on the state highway only to get to a county or city road and not be able to move again. And we felt like both systems have to be addressed. And of course, in Colorado, because only voters can approve a tax increase, we had to find a tax that voters liked the most or disliked the least. Which is probably more accurate, and sales tax is probably a little more appealing to most voters than some of the other options before us. So as I said, it raises $767 million in the first year, and it will allow us to bond about $6 billion in that $9 billion project list, so actually make some pretty serious headway. That project list is public. Voters in Longmont and throughout the state can look at it and see exactly what you get. One of the questions asked earlier was how much is I-25 North? The number I have right now is $653 million, and I'm happy to share more details about what it's going for, but that's the current allocation in that project list. The distribution, I think, is important because, again, what we said as a coalition is we're not going to just address our state's needs, we're going to address our local communities' needs at the same time. This was a seriously negotiated formula, no more messing with it. It's locked in now. And I think people are pretty happy with it. So 45% of it goes straight to the state. 100% of that goes to pay the bonds so you can get the $6 billion in projects. 15% to multimodal. And I would say there was a lot of time spent on this bucket, trying to make sure that we're creating cooperation and communities working together to solve some of our transportation needs. An example that comes up a lot in rural Colorado is moving seniors to appointments like for doctors or even to get groceries and having a van service that maybe 4 counties share, things like that. In Metro, probably more transit-oriented kind of discussion, but it gives you an idea of local priorities are what are submitted for that 15%. And then 20% directly to cities and directly to counties. And I think this was covered earlier, but I show Longmont first year over $3.1 million in new revenue comes straight into the city of Longmont. I think you might have had 2.8 or something.
That was last year, so you were right.
So 3.1. We submitted 198,000 signatures a week ago or something. I collected 180 of those, I think, myself, which was actually a good experience. you have to submit about 98,000 signatures to get certified, and so you could see we made sure we're really high. That is a messy process, and so everybody comes in very high because validation tends to be low. But we're pretty confident with our number that we'll be shortly certified by the Secretary of State. So what do we do next? Now we go around and talk with partners throughout the state, asking that people work together to try to accomplish this. I think for us, what we recognize is nobody has successfully addressed our statewide transportation needs with an increase in revenue, a tax increase, since the passage of Tabor. We think our competitive advantage is at risk for Colorado. I was recently in Utah meeting with representatives there. Utah has probably one of the most conservative legislatures in the country. I was talking with the Speaker of their House, and he said to me, we don't even have Democrats to blame out here because they've increased their sales tax dedicated to transportation, and they've increased gas tax twice. And their whole focus is, as he told me, is we're going to outcompete Colorado. We're going to attract those visitors. We're going to attract those businesses who say, we can deliver the quality of life that you can't. And so we really do believe this is an economic issue for us in this state, and we have to figure out how to get it done. And the only way we'll be successful in November is if we come together as a state and really advocate to fund our transportation system. Let me turn it to your questions and thoughts. Yes.
Hi, thank you. You mentioned that we were $1 billion short in our funding on the state level. How much did Tabor affect that? And because Utah doesn't have the same problem, which is why they
Yeah.
put more into their transportation funding.
Yeah.
To follow up,
Yeah.
will Tabor affect this if it passes?
Yeah, so these dollars, the language, so Tabor requires a vote of the people, as you know, and there's not only not Utah, but no other state in the union has that requirement. So I suppose if you thought the legislature would have passed increases, you might say this is a problem with Tabor. I think for our point of view at the chamber, we don't spend a lot of time focused on, you know, what got us in this situation, but focusing on the solutions that can help us get out of the challenge we're in. This in 20 years, this goes away, so it's not permanent. It does have the Tabor language in it that allows the collection of these revenues. It also has language that allows it to only be spent on our transportation system. So the legislature and local governments cannot change where that money goes. It must go into our transportation system.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You didn't say anything about this other transportation ballot initiative, Let's Go, or
Fix Our Damn Roads. Yeah.
Which looks like an unfunded mandate to me. Do you have any data on that, polling on that, one? And second, I assume it turned in signatures as well, or else it wouldn't be being handed out today.
Yeah.
Do you have any analysis on where the money would come from out of state general funding?
Yeah, so I'll do my best to talk a little bit about what I know about Fix Our Damn Roads, but what I can probably speak best about is why our chamber did not endorse that initiative. So a few reasons. It has strong opposition from education, both higher ed and K-12, for fear that when you bond, you are creating a commitment for a revenue stream that must come out of the general fund. And anybody else who's getting funding out of that general fund is extremely nervous about what happens to them. And currently in this state, we fund higher ed 48 out of 50th. And so you can imagine our higher ed institutions are extremely concerned about how this would work. For us as a business community, we think we've seen this model on an individual level in our country. It resulted in a financial crisis where people were able to take out debt without a revenue stream to pay it. We think this is similar. You pay more, by the way, this interest rate on this would cost more because it's not a dedicated revenue stream. So from a business perspective, it's more expensive debt, which we don't like either. And the uncertainty of it. So we felt like it wasn't the most fiscally responsible way to address our transportation needs. It's also, while $3.5 billion is a lot of money, it's not a lot when you look at our needs, $9 billion project list, and it would do nothing for our local governments throughout Colorado, and we believe they're just as important to address transportation. So those are the reasons we did not endorse this. They did submit signatures. I think they submitted about 150,000, and so they're waiting for their certification as well, so I don't know if they'll be on the ballot or not.
Thank you.
Yeah. I put you all to sleep?
Not me.
Yes, sir.
Both measures could pass, assuming they're certified, right?
Yep.
What's the
Yeah.
strategy there?
Yeah.
Duplication, unnecessary duplication?
Yeah, well,
It's for everyone.
yeah. If you can't get enough, just keep saying yes. Yeah. Our language is permissive, so our language allows the state to go into debt up to $6 billion. And so it doesn't mandate the state. This mandates the state. What I am unclear about is if maybe they could use our revenue stream to pay this, so you could have the same benefit, and maybe that could work, but I don't know if Caldera's mandates that it must be paid out of current general fund revenue. If it does, that would be a huge challenge, and we have asked some attorneys to kind of look into that. The reason I mention this is if both passed and it wasn't mandated that the general fund had to pay that, they could use the revenue stream we're creating, then in essence, what you would get is our package. $6 billion, checking this off on the first 3.5, and then we'd cover the other 2.5. So it wouldn't be too distressing. If this mandates that it must come out of the general fund, I think you'd see a lot of tension because you cannot take our revenue stream and put it anywhere else. It has to go into transportation. So it's a bad answer. I don't, this is always a challenge on the ballot. A good answer to a hard question. Thank you. What else? Yes?
So I'm Joe Average, and I've lived in Longmont for over 35 years, and I voted to have the RTD.
Yeah.
Because I thought, oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking at the projections. I won't probably be driving in 2042, for sure. And my question is, what happened to all that money that us Longmont people have been paying all these years towards this great rail system?
Yeah.
Where did that go?
Yeah.
And now it's being projected out really indefinitely.
Yeah.
And maybe a follow-on, if I may, an amendment to your question, is what's to prevent that from happening to Longmont with
Again.
either of these measures?
Yeah.
That's a big issue.
So I can't speak to fix our damn roads as effectively, but I can speak to our measure and how it was actually that experience that caused some of the policy you see in our measure. So how you're guaranteed that can happen first is county and city comes directly to you, spent on your priorities, monitored by you, controlled by you, no pass-through, no skim off the top, no redirection. So that was one piece for us that we felt like would increase the confidence, and 100% flexibility on how you spend it. No rules about how you can spend that money on your system. Local communities decide completely. The second piece is the project list that is published by CDOT. That is what you get. The money doesn't go to something else. So the 45%, the $6 billion in projects, you see the order of the list. It is online, it is published. It is exactly that list that we reference in the ballot, and so you're guaranteed to get that. But I do understand the frustration.
Well,
Our strategy was,
Joe Average is going to have a problem.
yeah,
I mean, most people that are not at forums and participate in the community or in the chamber, Mr. goes to
Yeah.
work every day, got back and like, oh my God, they want another tax increase for this. What happened to the last
right.
one?
We do
See the
understand.
results of it that they've put into it. That's going to be the problem.
Yeah.
So to
And then I'll
address
hand
part
up
of
here.
that, there is a multimodal piece. The 15% that goes to CDOT is for multimodal. And local communities and counties can apply with a project to that multimodal list. And we were successful with the CDOT commission to have the word rail put into that. So your local communities and counties can put money toward your rail. That's an option that they can do. It has to be a 50% match. So we haven't forgotten about it and are working very, very hard for it. So.
Thanks for adding that. It's a good reminder. I also will say, I think all of us understand the sensitivity and the challenge. And this is where we'll need your help more than ever, right? Because as frustrated as we are, if we don't invest, the experience of Longmont residents is going to only get worse. And while this money goes to CDOT and local governments, so RTD is not in that mix, I still think we have to continue to work together to figure out how we solve that other problem as well, and it doesn't go off the table because of this effort.
So I understand you don't represent the RTD at all. So but I'm going to ask for something similar, which is the point of contention that came from the RTD Fast Track project was that it was presented very much similarly to this, in that we're going to build the rail everywhere with this project list simultaneously with funding from your local communities. But there was a technical kind of loophole written into it saying, but we can divert money from different municipalities to assist in the completion of funding of projects in certain regions, which is a practical step because, of course, you don't want to have a train station held up for an extra 2 years because the tax dollars haven't quite come in from the store across the street. Is similar language baked into this as a point of practicality, or is there a hard distinction of there will be no cross-contamination or cross-polling?
Nobody can take your 20% from your city or 20% from your county. Nobody can re-divert that or put it somewhere else. The project list, the only thing that will determine is how far we can go. I'd say the interest rate is probably a bigger issue. But if a project is more expensive on that list, I mean, it could affect that you can't get to some of the ones that are way lower.
Is there a prioritization of that list?
Yeah, so on the website, you can see some prioritization of that list. The things we've shared with you today are all in the, very close to the top. So we feel very confident saying you're guaranteed you're going to get those projects. But nobody can change the formula of distribution, no.
After listening to you today, I came in with an opinion, and it's different.
I really hope you were no, and now you're yes.
I thought you could tell by the look of my face. Or I would have asked the question. Anyway, so I guess the big issue here is if you can convince me, how do you do it for all of those people that are going to say no?
You're going to help me. I mean, this is the truth,
Why did I
right?
know that was coming?
Nobody has passed a statewide tax increase since 1992 when Tabor was put in the state. The only exception to that are marijuana and tobacco. So I propose we make driving a sin. Okay, all right, so you don't like that. You don't like that, yeah. So the only way we're going to get this done is if we really all work to say, listen, we do think this one is the right policy and the right approach, and we have to work together. And you will see, I will be everywhere in this state. I will do nothing else but work on this issue to try to see if we can get it over the finish line. I will also tell you the reason you spend 4 years with a bunch of people who probably don't like me, but you spend it together working on this issue is because if you get it right, I think we're more likely to be successful. And we have a diverse, broad, statewide coalition, and my hope is that together we can talk to voters and help them see that we've really developed a policy here that should give them the confidence this time that we got it right.
So that list of all of the people, the coalitions that you're working with, it's going to be their responsibility to go to their constituents, the farmers, the bees.
All of us going together to say, this
that's
is,
the only way it's gonna work.
we agree. Yep, we agree. Did you have a question? No. You want to make one up? Yeah.
I'm not sure that I raised my hand.
Oh, sorry.
I have a question. Well, my question is, long-term, the state of Colorado needs to develop a strategy for mass transit. And it has, we've talked about it since 1970, when there was the will and the money, but we haven't done it.
Yeah.
And this doesn't really address this. We're just going to keep building more roads that we have to maintain, and they're going to be wider, and then it has to be a discrete system that is off the roads in order to move large numbers of people around.
Particularly in Metro, right, which is all of our experience, the Front Range. Yeah, but I think your point is well taken. That said, I also want to remind you, right, I don't have my phone up here, but transportation today is as much about our phone as it is about that road. And the reason we gave 100% flexibility to local governments on how you make the system work is because we do think you should be thinking very long term about the investments you make. And it shouldn't just be about adding a lane to make it work. Some of this, for example, we know one of the high priorities is smart metering onto I-25, that you can actually create flows that can add capacity as much as 25% to making it flow more smoothly. Systems that talk to our cars as our cars start to talk to each other, and the infrastructure, reducing accidents, which is a huge part of why we all slow down. So I think you're going to see technology be a significant part of the strategy, but it doesn't take away your point of we need to move massive numbers of people more effectively. And as we're all getting used to trains and taking transit, we should be investing more in it as well, particularly those of us who have that experience. What I do know in rural Colorado, that isn't the priority. So that was the other reason we tried to separate those dollars so you can spend yours where you say is your priority and they spend theirs where theirs is their priority.
I think that's a great strategy.
Was there another question? Yes, ma'am?
I'm sorry I'm talking too much. But I want this to pass. I personally think it's a good thing. But what's happening with RTD right now, and I think that this goes to the question of this woman over here, is that their timing is really, really bad. They're cutting routes all over the district. Some of the biggest voting blocks are where they're cutting, and rerouting people. The public does not see a difference between CDOT and RTD. The voting
Yeah,
public. It's all
true.
one transportation system. So I'm asking for your help in just reaching out to RTD and saying your timing is bad.
We are. But not just because of timing, right? I think our goal with the Regional Transportation District is to help them think about the ultimate goal is that you maximize ridership, that we create a seamless experience that people say this is easier than the alternatives available to them. And if we can't do that, all of this investment is for nothing. And that means it's not just the routes but it's also, the fares and how we think about fares. And frankly, what you want to incent is the further you're out, the more likely you are to get on a train. And so I think, we see a number of strategies that could help create a system that people really find easy to use and start to use it to a greater degree.
Thank you.
Well, to follow up, Denver is doing this big program called Denver Right. And it seems to me that Denver really does have its act together. I looked at the Denver Right program recently, and they are talking about their own transportation system that would overlay what RTD is doing. And I remember back about 9 months that there was concern from RTD that these local systems would compete with RTD ridership. And at least Denver has that option of looking at overlay, but I'm not so sure that overlay concept will work in Boulder. And personally, what I see in terms of, I agree with Joan. I like your tax program, but until you solve that, how people view the transportation system as a whole, there's been talk about separating from RTD in Boulder, but people get really concerned about that. And I realize these are really complex questions from your sophisticated point of view, but in the public's mind,
I understand.
You're going to really get stuck there.
Yeah.
And I can't stress to you enough that RTD is such a political problem now with the Northwest Corridor, which before was sort of your golden goose in terms of tax votes.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that as great as your presentation was, and I can only compliment you on it.
We have a huge challenge.
This is a very weird situation where a very liberal county that was very pro-taxes has developed such a bad taste for it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you solve that problem. I saw Mayor Bagley talking on TV the other night, And you.
And he was
No,
great,
seriously,
yeah.
The people that are backing this are the very people, in my opinion, that threw Boulder County and the northwest corner under the bus for fast tracks. And politically speaking, I think that, you know, Dr. Cog and
Yeah.
I haven't heard a wake-up call yet from Denver. I guess that's the bottom line in terms of what has happened to our tax dollars. And I heard you mention it, and I appreciate that, but I don't hear the mea culpa coming out of Denver yet.
Yeah. The mea culpa because Denver took the revenue?
I think between 2006 and 2011, there were a lot of decisions that got made.
Yes.
That weren't voter decisions.
Yes.
They were CDOT decisions, and they were RTD decisions, and they were developer decisions. And I think the public's mistrust is, I think that's your Achilles heel, at least in terms of Northwest.
Yeah.
border.
I think we completely recognize it. Our choices are, do we do nothing or do we try? And I will tell you a couple of reasons we decided to try. One is the federal government has said that they will prioritize those states who help themselves if there are resources available for infrastructure, and you've heard a lot of discussion with the Trump administration about putting resources into infrastructure. So if there's money available, we're at the bottom of that list right now because we've done nothing to help ourselves in the state. So one, we felt like we should get more of that money coming home and position ourselves to be able to capture it. Secondly, we think we're at risk for our very economic success, and it made us say we got to go for it. And we understand the challenge and the obstacles, but we have to, because if we don't even try, we know we're doomed. And then I would say, I think the structure of it was informed significantly by what our historical experience has been, where people's distrust was, to say, we're going to do everything we can to remove that risk on this initiative. And then lastly, you know, mayors in the metro area are in a crisis in terms of their communities and their transportation challenges. And the pressure on them is tremendous. And I think the fact that our metro mayors are discussing creating their own district to solve these kinds of issues for transportation means we would never solve it statewide. Because the minute the metro area says we've invested in ourselves and we're going to fix our transportation needs right here, we'll never be able to get enough votes throughout the state to say, let's fix the state system. So we knew we had one last shot before the metro area is going to have to say we're solving it on our own. And I will tell you, I think this is our last shot before you see more communities throughout the state say, we'll raise our own, we'll try to solve it ourselves, we'll work as a small region. And I really think it is important we keep a statewide transportation system that works together. The last thing I'll mention is this point about an overlay and sort of looking long term. We created what we call Mobility Choice. It's an initiative that is looking at cutting edge. We've brought in companies that have cutting edge access to data and technology to think about the pace of change in our transportation systems in the world and how we should be thinking about our investments vastly different. We're doing pilots. We brought, and it was hard, Dr. Cog, CDOT, and RTD to a table with the private sector to say we are going to plan more effectively, so we're all spending, we know what each other are spending money on, that we can take dollars further and be more effective with those dollars instead of everybody operating independently. And our hope is it will help the RTD area, because that's our focus in this work, to really create, through Dr. Cog and RTD, really meaningful long-term strategies to try to improve mobility, which is very different than thinking about, I'm in the bus business. Being in the mobility business shifts your thinking, and I think opens you to alternatives that are way more effective. And our hope is, through that work, we can improve the outcomes and deliver on the commitments that have been made in our region. So we're not ignoring it. It is on the front for us. It's not part of this initiative. RTD is not part of this initiative. Time's up. The lights have dimmed. Excel is like, get her off the stage. I'm happy to answer other questions or follow up with any of you. I really want to say thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to share with you. My hope is we could all work together to get this done, and then more importantly, continue to work together to solve the other commitments that have been made to this community and ensure you get the same transportation system that was promised to you so long ago, before 2042. Thank you.
We will turn it over to Mayor Beck.
Thank you. How many people here go to church? How many, okay, and if you don't go to church, how many people here have been to a Thanksgiving or Christmas potluck? Okay, this is how I look at this, okay? And my stomach was in a knot. It's always in a knot on this topic, because do I show up and is my job as mayor to cheerlead? Is my job to speak against it? I'm just gonna tell you how I view it and what council has said, and then you guys can make up your own mind. I think that is the best way to go. But the reason I ask about the buffet is I view this tax just like a church buffet at Thanksgiving. You and your wife, and this happens every year, we sit down and my wife doesn't want to look bad, so we plan what are we bringing, and we want to make sure we bring a lot, just enough. It doesn't matter, sometimes we don't have time, so we'll go to KFC and we'll get the big buckets of chicken. Other times my wife will take time to make chicken and chili chipotle and bring it, and we show up, and we don't want to be rude, so we wait till the end, right? And by the time we go through the line, even though my wife spends a couple hours slaving in the kitchen, or even though I've spent money buying 3 or 4 big buckets of chicken, without a doubt, the same thing always happens. Every Thanksgiving at the church potluck, I have on my plate a handful of potato chips, a Twinkie, and some type of potato salad or bean concoction that nobody else wanted to eat. And I leave upset that we brought our fair share and we wound up eating, a Twinkie, potato salad, and a handful of potato chips.
You like Twinkies?
I do like Twinkies. I do like Twinkies. Touche. No, so I look at I look at this particular issue. Kelly, you did a fantastic job. If you have a Rubik's Cube, she did a good job sharing the color that the Denver Chamber sees. And if you go down and talk to the Metro Mayor's Caucus, which I'm part of, I was probably the most vocal in reminding people that Longmont has got the short end of the stick, to the point where I've probably fractured a lot of my relationships in that group, to tell you the truth. So Colorado, from a Colorado perspective, Colorado needs this. $9 billion, in all fairness, is not what we need, it's our want. $6.7 billion is our need, but they're going for the whole enchilada. And I do have some reservations, and that is that there's no way do I think that they're going to spend $509 million on bus routes between Longmont and Boulder. I hear that, and it makes my stomach knot up, because I think they're telling us what we need to hear. And I think when the time comes to pay for it, they're going to say, who needs $509 million? There's an entire state with infrastructure needs and transportation needs. And you think that we're going to spend $509 million on BRT between Longmont and Boulder? I mean, if you don't think that conversation's coming, it is. They also put money into the 287 route to make us happy. But we don't have a project currently ready to go forward, which means they're not going to fund it, right? So I'm hearing this, going in eyes wide open. I think we're being told what we need in order to get our vote. And it's good for Colorado, and I understand why they're doing that. Therefore, it's also good for Longmont, because at least we're going to get some potato chips, some potato salad, and a Twinkie, and some crappy bean stuff. But so I'm going to vote for this. But I'm going to do it holding my nose. I'm not enthusiastic about it. I'd feel guilty getting up in front of Longmont constituents and advocating for it, because I feel that, yes, I do believe that, fast tracks and RTD is not CDOT, but I have been in the meetings for the last year, and the monetary promise on 119 went from 60 to 120 to 365 to 509. I mean, anything to get our vote, right? I'm just like, what? Or I was in the meeting when they argue about 5% or 1%, and what are we going to do? They landed on 0.62% because that's what they felt they could get a coalition to form and get behind. And so, you know, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. John Caldera has his view on one side of the Rubik's Cube. Kelly has her side of the Rubik's Cube. What I wish would happen is that, and by the way, I also sat in a meeting with CDOT. And our local representative, who used to be the mayor of Broomfield, sat there and, I mean, I advocated trying to get, along with other Northwest Corridor mayors, look, make sure we are not going to get screwed again. Give us some type of commitment that Longmont and the rest of the Northwest Corridor that didn't get their rail through fast tracks, the same thing's not going to happen again. Put us at the top of the list. They flat out said, no, we're not going to do that. We prioritize funding based on the projects that are ready and the transportation needs of the state. So again, I'm going to vote for it. But this is a crappy church potluck. That's what this is. And I don't care how you paint it. I don't care how you box it. That's what it is, at least in my opinion. For example, City Council, where do we stand? I believe City Council, who I think all of us are here. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who are we missing? Aaron. So 6 of us here. In last council meeting, I've also pushed the Mayors and Commissioners Committee to basically set aside some of their 20% local grant funding or local taxation, or the portion they collect, towards fast tracks to prime the pump. In other words, put 10, 15 million or whatever in order to get RTD to go, oh, okay, you're serious. Here's the rest of your money. And so City Council allowed me to sign that letter of support saying Longmont will support the Mayors and Commissioners Committee to get behind this. And I did it, but I don't do it happily, if that makes sense. So the other things that come to mind, we've spent, if we could get the $50 million, we pay $4.5 million every year to fast tracks still. Every year we're still paying. So if we could get the $50 million back that we pay to fast tracks, we could fund every single one of those local projects that we currently don't have the money for or that are partially funded. So these are the thoughts that go through my mind. And so I'm going to vote for it, but I want to make sure our community goes into this eyes wide open that it's a tax that we will be helping, again, the rest of the state and therefore helping us. And I believe that's kind of, I believe the rest of council stands with me in that they don't like it any more than I do, but they're going to vote for it because we need the transportation throughout the state. Is that fair, guys? Marcia's like slow head nod. So,
I have a question.
yeah, so and other things, so this is going to take Longmont from 8.515% up to 9.135%. And if they both pass, I expect to get our train. But don't vote for both. Don't vote for both. What question do you have, Marcia?
Well, I actually was about the both pass scenario, or a worse scenario. If Longmont's support for this is not strong, and I know, guys, this isn't what you expect to hear out of me. If Longmont's support for this is not enthusiastic and strong, what are the chances that people will vote for Fix Our Damn Roads thinking they've taken care of it and
this
vote
is
against this?
This is why I raised the Rubik's Cube. That question gets asked. No one knows the answer. The state passed kind of a little solution for some of the problems. We've got the Denver Metro Chambers, or the Denver Chamber of Commerce's championing of the 0.62%, which I thank, by the way. Just because I'm being honest and speaking as a Longmont mayor and resident doesn't mean that as a Colorado citizen I don't appreciate your efforts. And then John Caldera is the one, you know, libertarian radio talk show host, you know, Let's Make Waves. He's the one championing that. A little bit of a troublemaker. And so I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen if one passes, all passes. All I know is that nobody wants to have us in Longmont get our fast tracks. I do know that. I do know that we've paid $50 million to RTD for fast tracks, and we haven't gotten anything for it. I know that we do have a $6.7 billion need, and we have a shot to hit our $9 billion want. I know that if we pass the tax, our taxes are going to be over 9% on everything we spend in town. And I know that none of that's good news, but it means that we'll be able to get to Denver and our surrounding communities in a way that is not taking forever, as it currently does. Or you could do what I did, everybody rides motorcycles and just go on the shoulder.
I have a follow-up about.
Yes, Councilmember Martin.
About Fix Our Damn Roads.
And I don't know much about that.
I know, neither did I until I got here, and now I know one page's worth. But it seems to me that state budgets are gonna have to be redirected toward roads if 97, if Fix Our Damn Roads passes. They don't have a number on here. If Fix Our Damn Roads passes, then state services to the needier people of the state may suffer, which in turn puts additional burden on municipalities. So it's my feeling that municipalities should look at opposing it. Just wanted to get that out there. And yeah, if you haven't looked at what the budgetary impacts would be, then you're speculating as much as I am, so there's no real question there.
I'm gonna begrudgingly vote for the 0.62%. The Denver, the Metro Mayor's Caucus is unanimously behind it. They told me, if you can't get behind it, stay silent. So I was just quiet when they took the vote. The MCC is behind it. Denver Chamber's behind it. And like I said, we're gonna get, I mean, there's a potential to get, now granted, we will fight like mad to get at the front of the line, but there is a possibility that we're gonna get a handful of potato chips and some Twinkies.
No,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the other.
No, I know, and to be clear, I'm not going to vote for that one.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
Assuming, let's say, not enough people show up to said potluck and it fails to pass, and the fears expressed earlier by Kelly regarding everybody just trying to solve it themselves come to the forefront, what is the contingency?
RTAs, right? Basically, you get together. You ever seen The Postman? Terrible movie. But I guess basically we'd get together with our neighbors and come up with local taxing ideas to be able to fund our various highways and byways and whatnot. I am confident that regardless of what happens, we'll figure out a solution. This just happens to be the proposed solution. Yeah. By the way, I really liked your comments earlier.
Oh, thank you. I like your comment on TV. One of the things I worry about is RTD still is basically the system that federal dollars flow into the Denver regional area. And is there any way to ever fix that so the feds don't always feel constrained to give RTD money? I mean, if we go our own way, are we able to create districts that the feds will fund directly to us?
I don't know. And we have talked as a council, we have tossed around ideas like pulling out of RTD, suing RTD. We don't know. I mean, the reality is that we just don't know.
Well, is there any hope that at a state level RTD will just keep with fast tracks and be regional, and then that will freeze up some of the dollars aside from this 0.62 we're talking about?
So this has nothing to do with this. Okay, to be perfect, again, church potluck. You know, there is nothing about this. CDOT refused to put the Northwest Rail on their list. There is nothing about this that will help us get fast tracks, other than maybe we would be able to, like I said, prime the pump with our local dollars, or I don't know. But we're right now, Joan is championing the idea of what's called a peak rail service, 3 trains in the morning, 3 trains at night. We do it with the ski train with a bunch of kids every Saturday. I don't know why we can't do it with paying professionals with jobs 3 times a day. But the political pushback on everyone in the district other than Broomfield, Lafayette, Louisville, Boulder County, in all fairness, say they're behind it, and Superior, the Denver metro area, we get a lot of pushback even on those minor solutions.
Well, I guess the more general question I'm kind of asking you is, what do you think is the political future in general? I mean, where, is it gonna, I mean, right now, I just see it collecting a lot of money that still goes to Denver. Are we locked into that no matter what the politics are? Like, gonna vote like this?
I'm a big believer that if you go back to the Revolutionary War, you're not locked into anything, right? But what you're looking at, if I can tell you this, if RTD continues to collect $4.5 million a year without providing fast tracks, and then collects the 0.4 for RTD.
For fast track.
Yeah, but if they continue to collect the 0.6% off our sales tax and continue cutting our bus routes, there will be at some point the political solution will present itself, because Longmont's going to get fed up, and I'm kind of almost there. Joan?
I would just like to correct one thing. RTD does not get federal funds. They only get taxes. The organization that gets federal funds that RTD must apply to is Dr. Cobb. If they have a project that they want to partner with the city or an organization, then they would apply to Dr. Cobb with that project for federal funds. But they don't get any federal funds.
I don't know, I just went in and looked at the list of federal projects, and it seemed to me that the people that are putting in the project requests to the feds, which are sort of like all these ones, you have to have a plan, you have to have matching funds, you have to show reason that the feds are gonna give you money. I mean, it's a priority distribution.
But it's not RTD. I just want to make that clear.
So can we as communities step into that flow of stream, and we don't have to rely upon RTD?
You know what, that's a different discussion, I think, and it's pretty detailed.
Yeah, it's a pretty robust, I mean, pulling out RTD. And so going back to Let's Go Colorado, it's like, yeah, Kelly's like, let's go Colorado. And I'm the ornery teenager upstairs dragging his feet, not wanting to go to the car, but I'll get in just after I scream and yell, and I'm gonna have my headphones on, and I'm not talking to nobody. So it's 10 till 10. Let's wrap it up. Scott, you're back to you. Or are we done?
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. Let's give all our presenters a round of applause. Kelly, thanks for coming.